What up, my friends? Welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited you're here today because we're going to be discussing my top 15 Christmas books plus a series. These are all going to be spoiler-free reviews. I'll share a little summary of the book and what I loved most about it. I'll also give a star rating as well as a spice rating, as long as it's a book I've read in the past couple of years, because some of the older books I might not remember what the spice factor was. So if you've been looking to get into that festive spirit and pick out a good book to read, I am here for you. Go grab yourself a little snacky snack, maybe a hot chocolate, some eggnog, whatever you'd like. Get cozied up, and I'm gonna yap your ears off about these holiday books that I love. I have a few that are historical holiday romances, and then the rest of them are going to be contemporary, and then at the end we're going to discuss a series. So we're going to start off with the historical ones. The first one I want to get on your radar is His Lady of Mistletoe by Charlotte Jardine. This one was a 5-star read for me, 0 out of 5 on Spice, so it is a clean, closed-doored romance. So this one follows Beth, who is actually the daughter of a baron, so she's supposed to be out in society, but the way she prefers spending her days is actually caring for patients. When one of her patients ends up going missing, she sets herself out on a mission to find him and runs into his nephew, who seems to have a very bad impression of her. So I read this book an entire year ago, and I still remember the warmth feeling this book gave me. It was just such a special book. I loved the spin the author had on somebody being high in society and how she was balancing her call and her vocation to help others while still honoring her family and the obligations that came with that, being a member of society. I just thought it was so beautifully done. The characters were so dynamic. They had so many beautiful layers to them. It truly embodied the spirit of Christmas because the entire story was really about how she was serving others. She had such a humility about her, but she also had such a strong backbone, and I loved the way that she pushes back against the other character who made very inaccurate assumptions about her. The entire book was just really well done. So that is one I would definitely recommend, especially if you love historical romance or if you've been thinking about dipping into it. There's just something so timeless and so classic about reading a historical romance, and the Christmas ones just bring an extra level of cozy. So I would definitely recommend that book. All right, next up we have A Seasonal Pursuit by Rebecca Connolly. This one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 on Stars, 0 out of 5 on Spice, so it is a clean romance. So this one follows Rose, who has come to accept the fact that she is not going to find a match. She spent years out in society trying to find an eligible suitor, but it's just not happening. So she has settled into the idea that she's just going to live a life of solitude and she'll find a way to be happy in it. And her aunt dangles the perfect way to make that happen by saying she's going to gift her a beautiful cottage set out in the countryside. But the catch is she has to find a love match, and she has to do it very quickly, which doesn't really go along with the cottage being a place of solitude for her. What I loved most about this book is it truly felt like I got to immerse myself in a holiday season back during Regency days. There was a visit to an estate where a bunch of people all came, and the lady who owns the home was hosting everybody, and there was games that they were playing, traditions that they were going through, and it was just really cool to step into that. One of the parts cracked me up. They were discussing Christmas decorating, and the main female character said to the male, "Wouldn't it be nice if we could decorate earlier than Christmas Eve?" And so apparently back then, they literally decorated on Christmas Eve for Christmas Day. And she made a comment about wanting to soak in the season a little bit longer. And I was just thinking, now in 2024, we're decorating in June and July in stores at this point for Christmas. So it's funny that she was trying to negotiate earlier than Christmas Eve for Christmas decorating. There was a warmth about the characters, but also a maturity that I really, really enjoyed it. There was a lot of layers to the story. There's some really deep moments. Just everything about it was beautiful. It was a great way to really sink into a festive, timeless type romance. All right, the next one was A Holiday by Gaslight by Mimi Matthews. This is also a historical romance. This one is actually a novella, so it was under 200 pages. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 on Stars, 0 out of 5 on Spice, so it is a closed-door romance. So this one follows Sophie, who's been promised to a man that is below her class level because her father had spent her dowry on upgrades to their home. She ends up getting cold feet and goes behind her father's back to try and cancel the arrangement, but soon realizes that she may have been a little too hasty in her request. I really enjoyed this one, and I loved how much the author was able to pull off in 165 pages. Nothing felt rushed, but there was such amazing character and story development done in such a short amount of time. It was also somehow in 165 pages. It was a very slow build in their relationship, but there was such good tension and chemistry. So even though it doesn't have any spice in it, I didn't feel like I was missing anything whatsoever because both the romance and the connection between the two was really high. If you're looking for like a quick read because it's under 200 pages, I would definitely recommend picking this one up. All right, now we're going to move into some contemporary titles, and this first one is from one of my favorite authors. It's called Snowed In by Catherine Walsh. First of all, Catherine Walsh, you guys need to go follow her on Instagram because she's actually an Irish writer, and she has this really, really funny, almost like self-deprecating, dry sense of humor that just cracks me up. So she is so much fun to follow on Instagram, and I've pretty much loved every single book I've read of hers. So this one is called Snowed In, but honorable mention is she has another one called Holiday Romance that's also a Christmas book that I would also get on your radar, but this one happens to be my favorite. This one I gave a 5-star on, 1 out of 5 on spice, so there are some spicy scenes. This one follows Megan, who was actually once a runaway bride, and she ended up having to leave her small town because everybody took the jilted groom side, but they don't know what actually happened. She ends up going home for the holiday season and runs into Christian, who ends up presenting her an opportunity for a fake dating scenario that he thinks will help both of them out. So like I said, Catherine Walsh has such a dry, witty humor about her. The banter between the two was just so well done. And something about her writing just feels completely effortless, even though I know it's probably anything but. It just feels really natural, and I just loved the character so much. I felt like I was hanging out with friends, and I truly felt like I got to escape into this book. So if you're looking for a fun one and you're okay with spice, I would definitely pick this book up. All right, the next one is truly one of my favorites. It's called A Newport Christmas by Jess Heilman. This one I give a 5-star rating and 0 out of 5 on spice. So this one follows Quinn, whose life has been a pretty big hot mess. She ends up having an opportunity to bake some gingerbreads for a bride who happens to be a very popular social media influencer. So she's hoping this is her opportunity to get her name out there. The bride offers for her to stay at a specific house, but she ends up being surprised by the bride's brother, who was supposed to be out of town, but turns out he isn't. If you guys have sat through any of my book recommendation videos before, you've probably heard me sing the praises of Jess Heilman, and I'm not going to stop doing that right now. She is one of my favorite authors, and I just feel like she is so special. She writes in such a timeless and swoon-worthy way. She normally does historical romances. However, this book was actually the first one I ever read from her, and it is a contemporary romance. This one I just love so much because it really embodied the season. There was like gingerbread baking and things like that in the background. There was a winter wedding, and so all of those things gave the cozy vibes. Both of the main characters in this one had been through really rough relationships, and the main character Quinn is going through a lot in her life. And so it was really well done how she was able to balance the festivity of the season while working through some challenges. I just felt like the book was just so well done. It kept me intrigued the entire time, and I just couldn't recommend it more. You guys, I just realized that I had pulled myself this adorable little, what is this thing called? Bow for my hair, and I forgot to wear it. Headband, that's what it's called. How dare I? But anyways, I'm not going to let the whole thing go through without putting this in my hair. So there we are. The next book is actually a like holiday fiction. So it's not a romance, which is usually what I read, but I absolutely loved this one. It was such a treasure. It's called Christmas by the Book, and it's by Anne Marie Ryan. This one I give a 4.5 out of 5 on stars, and there's no spice in this one. So 0 out of 5 on spice. So this one follows Nora and Simon, who run a beloved bookshop, but due to internet sales and high taxes, they have been struggling to keep their doors open. They end up having a special customer come through who inspires them to send out 6 random books to people, and throughout the story they end up learning exactly how much those books meant to them. So this book is way slower paced than I usually like, and there's also a pretty high character count. So at the beginning of the book I had a hard time keeping track of who was who because some of the characters had similarities, so it just made it a little difficult for me. But by the time I got to the end of the book, everything had just wrapped up so beautifully. It just reminded me me what Christmas is supposed to be about. It had such a beautiful community backstory to it. People coming together, people learning the importance of kindness. If you're looking for a book to bring like that holiday magic, that holiday spirit, this is definitely one to pick up. The next one is A Very Merry Bromance by Lyssa Kay Adams. This one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I read this prior to me doing my spice ratings, but I want to say it's a 1 out of 5 on spice. I think she does explicit scenes, but I don't think they take up a lot of real estate. So, but don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure there is at least some spice in this one. This book is actually from a series, and it's called the Bromance Book Club series. So in the first book of this series, and the way this whole series started, is it starts off with a man who needed help in his marriage. He has a very close-knit group of friends, and they all start reading romance books, kind of like manuals and guidelines, in order to have a better chance of being the men that women deserve. So this one follows Colton, who's a country musician, and he's trying to use the Bromance Book Club to help him out with somebody he had a one-night stand with named Gretchen, but she seems insistent on them just staying casual, so he makes it his mission to prove to her exactly how strong their chemistry is. My favorite thing about this book that sticks with me is I still remember how generally it's usually the female that's like the Christmassy spirit, sunshiny type person, but in this book it was actually the opposite. The female was like Grinchy style, and then the country musician was actually the one that was all about the holiday magic. There was a lot of like deep topics actually worked into this book, and all of the books in this series are the same, but she does it in a way that keeps it pretty light, and she sprinkles humor in to be able to break those moments up. The group of guys in that Bromance Book Club, the shenanigans that they get into, just pure entertainment. So if you're looking for something funny that has a touch of like emotional depth to it, I would definitely recommend picking this one up. This next one I'm super excited to talk about. It's called How My Neighbor Stole Christmas by Megan Quinn, one of my favorite authors, and I'm gonna pop a picture up on the screen because the other night I actually got to go meet Megan Quinn, which was the coolest thing ever. She came to Jacksonville to do a book signing, and there was no way I wasn't going, and it was actually for this one. I knew she was going to be hilarious in person, but she ended up being even funnier than I thought.
I asked my publisher, I was like, what kind of spice level are we talking about here? And in the back of my head, I was kind of like, it'd be so great if they said no spice, because then I could just go full Hallmark. But they were like all the spice possible, like nothing, like hold nothing back, don't hold back. And I was like, that's when I like asked my friends, I was like, they said that don't hold anything back. Like I feel like I need to go for it. And then they dared me to use a candy cane, and I was like, you guys are absolutely disgusting. And then I was like,
it was just so cool to be in her presence. I actually made her a Christmas ornament as well because this year she became a New York Times best-selling author. So I'll put a picture up on the screen of the ornament that I gave her when I met her at the book signing, and that was just such a cool moment. So the book signing was actually for this book, which I gave a 4.5 out of 5 on stars and 2 out of 5 on spice. So this one follows Story, who returns to her hometown of Kringletown to help with her ailing aunt. When she gets there, she finds out that her aunt is part of this magical Christmas competition series, and she needs to step into her aunt's place, and she's not happy about it. Her next door neighbor Cole seems to be holding some type of grudge against her, and she doesn't understand why, so he purposely enters the competition just to make her life a little bit harder. This book was so funny. It was so funny. I was cackling. There's moments where I really felt like I was watching a movie, and it was so funny because she was talking about how she wants this book specifically to be turned into a movie. And I was sitting there thinking, I've never had a book that I have been able to visualize as much as I did on this one. There's like a town-wide Christmas competition happening, so you get a little bit extra because there's more characters sprinkled in than in a standard romance. And what I love about this one in particular is Christmas books and romances in general obviously sometimes toe the line of being cheesy, but I feel like Megan Quinn just was like, that's what it is, and she just leaned into it and just turned the dial up on the shenanigans. Like there was just so many shenanigans in this holiday romance that just made it absolutely so much fun. And my favorite part about this book is a lot of times with romances, I feel like once you hit like that 75%, 80% mark, it starts to kind of die off a little bit, but this one truly goes right up until the the epilogue. So you're getting the action experience of this romance all the way up until the end. Probably one of my favorite Christmas books I've ever read. The next one that I read was called Love Light Farms by B.K. Borison. This one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 on stars. I did not rate the spice factor because I read this one a couple years ago, but I want to say it's like a 1 out of 5 on spice because I know other books from this author, they do have explicit scenes, but it's not like heavy on the real estate, and it's easy enough to skim through if you're not into spice. So this one follows Stella, who enters a competition that's being hosted by a social media influencer to try and save her Christmas tree farm. She made a mistake and ended up lying on her application, saying that she has a boyfriend because she wants to make her Christmas tree farm seem as romantic as possible. In order to make sure she doesn't get caught, she ends up convincing her best friend Luke to pretend to be her boyfriend, but he soon realizes he probably doesn't want it to be pretend. This book was just quintessential Christmas. It was so romantic. It was set on a Christmas tree farm. I mean, the vibes could not vibe harder. You know what I'm saying? There's a sweet, sweet small town, and you get a glimpse into future characters that are in this series. I just loved this entire series, but this is the one that is definitely the most Christmassy of all of them. If you like Hallmark movies, this would be a great one to pick up. I think this is just a great one for a quintessential Christmas romance. The next one is called The Plight Before Christmas by Kate Stewart, and this one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 on stars. And yet again, I read this one a couple years ago, so I don't have a spice rating, but I think there is some explicit scenes, but I want to say it's like a 1 out of 5 on spice. So this one follows Bee, who is having a very, very rough time, and her mom has convinced the entire family to escape up to their family cabin to spend Christmas together. Unfortunately for her, her brother brings home her ex-boyfriend, the man who shattered her heart 2 decades earlier. So this one I went in kind of just expecting like, you know, Christmas vibe type thing, but it ends up bringing a lot of angst and emotions that I was not at all expecting. So this one definitely takes you on more of an emotional roller coaster than your standard cheesy holiday romance. What was really cool in this one too is that most of the time romances are pretty predictable by nature, which I don't consider to be a bad thing because I feel like if you want to read for entertainment but you don't want to have your mind racing about a situation, romances are perfect for you. But in this one, there was actually a conflict that happened and I was on a completely different path than it ended up being. So I ended up getting pretty surprised by the author and what actually had happened between these two. Overall, I would definitely recommend this one. I loved the cabin aspect. I loved the family aspect. This was really cute. The next one is called Merry Xmas by Courtney Walsh. This one I gave a 4.25 out of 5, and I don't have a spice rating on this one, and I can't even guess. This one I read in 2022, so it's been quite some time. This one follows Marin, who is vying for a spot as a host on the show Good Day Denver. She's trying to convince her producer that she's right for it, and the audience seems to be obsessed with the idea of her and her ex-boyfriend. It gets worse when she shows up to her small town and her mother has her ex-boyfriend in the house. She apparently also has her mind set on them getting back together. So this one I read a while back, but I still remember how heartwarming and how cute the entire story was. The only reason why it wasn't a 5-star read for me was because the main female character, Marin, is going through quite a bit, and it was pretty obvious to everybody around her, but they seem to keep just piling more and more nonsense on top of her, and it just kind of made the reading not as enjoyable as I would have liked it to be. But I really loved the plot and how she was going for that position at work and how that all worked out with the audience input and all of that. So overall, I think this is a fun one to pick up this holiday season. The next one that I read was called Holiday Hostilities by Katie Bailey, and this one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 on stars and 0.5 out of 5 on spice. So this one has like a touch of spice, but not much. So this one follows Olivia, who is a flight attendant who's been on an international route for quite some time, but she decides she wants to try and change her route over to Atlanta so she could be closer to her brother. However, being closer to her brother also means being closer to his teammate, who is somebody that she has hated for many, many years. My favorite part about this book is how natural it all felt. Every character and every layer that was added to it just felt like it was meant to be there. I'm not like the hugest sports romance person. I'll read them. It's not my favorite type of subgenre or whatever you want to call it. But this one I really enjoyed the way hockey was weaved into it because I felt like it kind of leaned into the wintry, Christmassy type vibes even more. The enemies to lovers was done so well in this book too. It felt really believable without feeling cruel. I'm really picky when it comes to enemies to lovers. When it's done right, I really, really enjoy it. And I feel like it was done right in this one. The next one is a novella and it's called To Aspen and it's by N.J. Gray. This one I gave a 5-star. I don't have a spice rating on it, but I want to say it was 1 out of 5 on spice. Pretty confident there's spicy scenes in this one. But this one I still remember to this day, even though it was a novella and I read it a couple years ago. It's about a group of people that are in a luxury cabin out in Colorado and they end up getting snowed in. It just had the ultimate like snowed in experience Christmas vibes. And it follows Aspen, who's staying with one of her friends who has invited a group of his friends to come to the cabin. She ends up having a run-in with one of the guys there because he's just rich and arrogant and she's over it. But there's some type of chemistry between them that she just cannot deny. I just love this one so much. And like I said, I got all of those snowed in vibes from it. The characters were really great. The writing was done really well. It was just the perfect short escape. So if you're looking to get back into reading, dip your toes a little bit, this might be a good one to start with, especially this time of year. All right, the next one is called Resting Scrooge Face by Megan Quinn, and this one is actually just a short story. This one follows Nola, who wants nothing to do with Christmas because she's been going through a lot, including a really bad breakup, but she starts to get mysterious letters delivered to her by the mailman, and she's not sure where they're coming from. This book had a very unique structure about it, and it was just sweet, short, to the point. I really enjoyed like the pen pal aspect of it. It almost had like a You've Got Mail type vibe happening, which that's one of my favorite vibes to have. The setting was really cute. It was set in Maine. It was just a good one. Definitely one I'd recommend picking up. Next up, we have Cruel Winter with You by Allie Hazelwood. This one is another short story. I gave 4.25 out of 5, 1 out of 5 on spice. This one follows Jamie, who goes over to her best friend's house to borrow a roasting pan and ends up running into her brother, the boy who broke her heart. While she's there trying to acquire the pan, the weather is getting worse and worse outside, and it gets so bad that they end up getting snowed in together. This one was just, it was perfect as a novella. I didn't feel like I needed more out of the story. I feel like I just got enough. The snowed in part obviously added to the romance. It had such a cozy feel about it. There was major history between the two characters, and somehow Allie Hazelwood is able to pull it off, even given how short the book is. So overall, if you're looking for a fast one with all the Christmas vibes, I definitely recommend this one. To wrap all of this up, the last thing I wanted to get on your radar is actually a series of books. The name of the series is Winter Street, and it's by Ellen Hildebrand. It starts off with the book Winter Street, and then there's Winter Stroll, Winter Storms, and Winter Solstice. The series follows the Quinn family, who own an inn on Nantucket. And Nantucket is obviously known for its summery vacations. However, the name of this inn is actually called Winter Street Inn. And the series essentially just sees the family through a lot of trials and tribulations. They're a modern family in a way. There's been divorces, there's been remarriages, there's been different relationships and things like that. So I just really, really loved it. There's always a little heaviness when it comes to Ellen Hildebrand. She tends to really pull at the like melancholy strings, and this one was no different. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of things that were very heartbreaking to work through and things like that. But I just loved that at the heart of it, it was really about family and people pulling together and being there for one another, even if it's not in the most conventional way. So I would definitely get that one on your radar, especially if you want kind of like rich people drama, because that's essentially what's happening. They're like a prominent Nantucket family. There was such a relatability to them, but it still had that juicy drama, gossipy type vibe to it at different points. All right, so that wraps up my top 15 holiday reads, plus that bonus series I wanted to get on your radar. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you walk away with at least 1 or 2 books that'll get you in the Christmas spirit. If you have a favorite Christmas book, please leave it down below. I actually forgot to say at the beginning, but I am such a dork. I have a spreadsheet of all of the books that I've read and I keep track of it. And I've read over 80 Christmas books, but I feel like I could never read enough. There's something just so magical about escaping into a Christmas book. So throughout the year, if I'm having a rough time or if I've read kind of a heavy book, I will pick up a Christmas book in March. I don't care. So if you have a favorite that you could recommend to me, I'd love to know what it is. Please feel free to leave it down below. If you happen to be looking for more book recommendations, be sure to check me out on Instagram. I have an entire account dedicated just to book content. It's called @CapeChapters. I'll leave it up on the screen. If you ended up enjoying the vibe while you were here, on this channel, I mostly share a lot of meal inspiration, but I do share these book wrap-ups at least once a month. Please feel free to check out the rest of my channel, and I'd love it if you'd subscribe. I hope I delivered whatever you needed when you clicked on that thumbnail, and I hope you have a magical day. Bye!